On the night of August 22nd, 2025, a routine ride on Charlotte's Lynx Blue Line turned into something no commuter ever expects to see: a sudden, brutal end to someone's life, captured on transit video and broadcast into millions of phones and living rooms. The victim was 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee who had come to the United States to rebuild her life after war. She boarded the train after a long shift. Like thousands of others who rely on light rail every day, she sat down just to go home. Across the aisle sat de Carlos de Juan Brown Jr., 34 years old, a name that appears again and again in public safety records: arrests, short stays in custody, encounters with mental health crisis teams. On that August night, the surveillance footage shows the two with no visible interaction. Then, in a rupture of ordinary time, Brown stood up, pulled out a knife, and attacked. It happened so fast, passengers described it as unreal. The train's steady hum, the squeal of brakes, a sudden thud, and the sound of people shouting in horror. Investigators say the attack was unprovoked. The footage shows Brown walking calmly toward another car. After the stabbing, police took him into custody. At the very next stop, he was arrested on the train and charged with first-degree murder under state law. But then, the Department of Justice stepped in, filing a federal charge, accusing him of an act causing death on a mass transportation system, a charge that raises the stakes and opens the door to the most severe penalties. But those bare facts, the date, the place, the names, are only the first layer. The story unfolded on two tracks. One track, the criminal investigation. The other, the national conversation. What evidence did police have? What motive could be proven? And beyond the courtroom, what does this single killing say about the safety of public transit, the failures of mental health care, and, inevitably, the question of race? Iryna's life makes the loss even more human. She fled violence to seek safety in Charlotte. Friends described her as gentle, someone who loved small routines, a cup of coffee, a late-night text home, quiet study, and modest plans for the future. She was building a life, piece by piece, the kind of life so many immigrants and refugees dream of. Her brutal end was not just a local tragedy. It struck deep into communities that saw in her a story of hope and vulnerability. And then there was Brown. His record told another story: violent arrests, property crimes, episodes of mental crisis. Critics asked, how many warning signs were ignored? How many points where the system could have acted differently were missed? Longer supervision, better mental health intervention, stricter bail. Again and again, the pattern repeated: short detentions, quick releases, and then back into community life. Until that night, when the footage forced the public to face the consequences. And then race entered the frame, not because investigators announced a racially motivated crime, but because when a black man is accused of killing a white or white-appearing woman, public imagination follows a predictable path. Social media raced ahead of the investigation. Partisan voices filled the air. Some framed the killing as racially directed violence. Others pushed back, reminding the public that no evidence had proven any racial motive. Civil rights advocates and community leaders urged caution. They warned that premature racial claims only inflame tensions and distract from deeper questions like whether communities provide adequate social services for people with repeated mental health crises. That tension between the human desire for a simple motive and the messy reality of competing explanations became part of the story itself. The video footage mattered for two reasons. First, it fixed the sequence of events more clearly than any eyewitness memory ever could. The way the train car looked minutes before the attack, the sudden movement of the assailant, and the scramble that followed. Second, footage became public evidence, replayed on news shows, shared on social feeds, shaping outrage in real time. Officials pointed to the imagery to show the brutality. Prosecutors used it as a central piece of their case. Media outlets and law enforcement statements hardened the debate. The pictures were undeniable. When prosecutors filed the federal complaint, they framed it as more than a homicide. It was an assault on public infrastructure, an attack on mass transit itself, and on every passenger who relies on it. The Department of Justice stepped in. Their involvement elevated the case, signaling that federal authorities viewed the crime not only as individual violence, but as a public safety crisis. That move drew political attention. National figures seized the story. Some demanded harsher enforcement, longer detentions for repeat offenders. Others argued for expanded mental health care and stronger community supports. The case became political currency, a single act of violence, serving many agendas at once. On the ground in Charlotte, the response mixed grief, protest, and demand for change. Vigils gathered neighbors, co-workers, and strangers. Candles burned, Ukrainian flags waved, signs read, safer trains. Transit officials promised reform, more visible police patrols, stronger security protocols. Community groups demanded more, better lighting at platforms, emergency call boxes, crisis response teams, and deeper collaboration between law enforcement and mental health providers. All of it offered as an antidote to what many saw as a chain of missed opportunities. Legally, the path forward would be methodical, forensic timelines, witness testimony, psychiatric evaluations, and prosecutorial decisions about charges and strategy. If the defense argued mental incompetency or diminished capacity, it could complicate the effort to prove premeditation. If the prosecution leaned on the brutality and the footage, their case would rest on the power of the visual record. An argument about the nature and immediacy of the attack. Either way, the courtroom would become a battlefield where competing narratives collide, a system that failed, an individual's pathology, and questions of motive, all tested under oath and under the cold rules of evidence, not in the noisy court of public opinion. For storytellers hungry for true crime drama, the temptation is always there to fill in the blanks with confident assertions. But a responsible narrative, one that engages deeply, can do more. It can build suspense while preserving the truth. Begin with what you know: the date, the train, the names, the footage, the charges. Then layer in the context: the immigrant victim searching for a better life, the suspect's troubled legal and health history, the city's policy landscape, the political reaction. Use direct, verifiable detail to anchor each chapter. When you speculate, label it clearly. Frame it as a question. Invite reasoned discussion, not rage, at its core. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do communities protect the public? How do they care for those in constant crisis? Is arrest and short detention enough, or is real safety found in sustained mental health care, stable housing, social support? Does public transit truly protect its most vulnerable riders, or does it leave them exposed? And the hardest question of all, when two lives collide in one violent moment, how do we weigh individual responsibility against structural neglect? This story is not a neat moral lesson. It is a wound with many edges. Grief for a young life cut short, anger at a man accused of a senseless act, and a complicated debate about what prevention really looks like. As the narrator, your job is to hold that tension, to let listeners feel the raw details, while guiding them toward the questions that matter most. That is how curiosity lives on, and more importantly, how it fuels the conversations that might prevent the next tragedy.